Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're looking at some database jargon that you'll need to know. Starting with, what is a cursor? We're also going to look at what is commit. And finally, just a couple of words on how we're going to write SQL, and then we'll move on to the next video. Cursors. All operations in SQLite are made by cursors and not by the connection object itself. And there's two reasons for that. First reason is that if we have a single connection, we can only perform one operation at a time. If we have many cursors, we can use each cursor to read some data and one to write some data. Remember, we are limited to one write operation at a time, but multiple cursors can be reading data at the same time. The cursor also has a specific meaning, and there's a reason why it's called a cursor, and that is when we read some data. Let's say we have this table here, and we tell the cursor to fetch some data, get some data out of the database. The cursor starts there, at the very top, right before our first row. When we tell the cursor to move over to the next line, it will give us the first line, and the cursor will move to the second row. Notice how this cursor is actually like pointing at a place. That's why it's called a cursor, because cursors are used to point at things. And this cursor here is pointing at its current location down the table. When we read the first row, it moves over to the second row. Now, when we ask the cursor to read one row, it's going to read one row after the one it's at now. So it's going to move over to row 3, and it would give us row 2, and so forth. And this is really the main reason why it's called a cursor. Because every time you ask for a new row, it's going to move down, and you cannot go back up. So the cursor just keeps pointing down and moving down as you ask it for rows. Okay, so we are going to encounter some interesting functionality to do with this way of operating soon. Next up, the commit. Commit just means save the result to the disk. And that's because we keep a bunch of data in memory until we commit. So for example, say we want to insert some data into our database. We tell SQLite to insert it. It doesn't actually get inserted. It gets saved in memory until we say commit all of this. That allows us, for example, if we try to insert some data and it turns out to be corrupted or something like that, we can then roll back and not actually save anything to the disk. It also allows us to write multiple things together. For example, we can delete a user and insert a new user and then commit. And that actually proceeds to removing the data from the disk and inserting the new data. Let's say, for example, we want to create a new purchase for a user, and then we want to, as a result of that, update their credit card. But if one fails, we don't want to do the other. We can try to add the purchase, and if that fails, we will roll back and not proceed with the credit card. So this commit allows us to, when we are on a state where we want to save things to a disk, actually save them and not before. So it gives us a bit of freedom, and also it gives us extra speed. Keeping a bunch of things in memory and then writing them all together is faster than writing them one by one, just due to the limitations on how the hard drives work, where the data is getting stored. Now going to writing SQL, I'm going to redirect you over to the next video. SQL is very English-like, so the queries are going to be fairly readable. And we're going to do things like selecting data, inserting data, and things like that. But we're going to do that in the very next video. So I'll see you there.